Well, hello there everyone, my name is Amy, this is the Opinionated Woman, and welcome to Crafty Reads The Plague Edition. Yes, after, what is it, like 2.5 years now, I finally caught COVID somehow. My sibling also has it, so one of us gave it to the other, we don't know which way it is, but today is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, day 4 of quarantine out of 7. So I have been reading, and therefore I have books to update you on. And as we did with the last Crafty Reads episode, I am going to be crafting. No shit, I'm going to be crocheting. This is what I'm going to be working on. This looks a lot more substantial when I hold it like this. But this is my daisy blanket. I've been working on it for a while now. These squares are quite small. Let me find one. There you go. So they're quite little. So I work on them in batches, and then as I go, I weave in my ends because I don't want to be one of those people who has all of the ends to weave in at the end. Fuck that. And then I connect them as I go because I don't really have a lot of storage space. So this is what we're going to be working on. I've already done the daisy part because I did them in batches. So I've got three daisies here that I'm going to do the background on, and then talk about the last 5 books that I read. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so the first book that I finished, I've been reading forever, and that's 10 Types of Humans by Dexa Diaz. This is a chunkster of a book that my friend and her fiance, who was also my friend, gave to me, and it is so interesting, but because it's like quite heavy nonfiction, I thought, the best way to consume this is doing it bit by bit. So that's what I've been doing, like reading a chapter at a time in between other books, or like reading 2 books at the same time, like one in the morning, one in the evening. And that's how I've been getting through it. And finally, I got to the end of it. This is basically a nonfiction that uses... It outlines 10 different types of people. So let me read you the 10 types. So it's not like a personality test or anything like that. It's very much like we all have these elements inside ourselves, and he decides to basically look at who we are and what drives us as humans, like on a chemical level, on a social level, all through that. So we've got the kinsman, the perceiver of pain, the ostracizer, the tamer of terror, the beholder, the aggressor, the tribalist, the nurturer, the romancer, and the rescuer. So what Diaz does is he takes us through each one of these as we go, and he uses a case study in each one to outline his point, but at the same time he goes into like scientific investigations that have been taken on these topics, and different scientific studies that have been done, like social studies to find out like the nature of people, and things like that, which is very, very interesting. So it just basically uses social sciences and neurosciences and tries to figure out why the human behaves the way that it does and our relation to each other, which is super, super interesting. The stories in here are very heavy. Like it goes from like children working on a lake, basically like slave children working on a Lake Volta is it Ghana? I can't remember. And the risks that they're at every day, to women that have suffered with female genital mutilation, people that have had strokes, and like been created in like locked in syndrome, where like you are perfectly aware of everything that's happening to you, but you can't express it outwardly. And he asks you questions of like really intense morality, like I don't want to spoil any of the things that happen in here, but he'll also put aside like theoretical things to establish his ideas a little bit. So like, okay, your house is on fire, your one kid's at the one end of the house, other kids at the other, you can only save one, which one do you save? And then starts putting all these caveats in to try and make you to like test your morality. And it's just very complex. It like really like hurt my brain to think about these things. And a lot of the situations, you know, like having to, you know, help a family member in their lives because they're living in very terrible circumstances, you know, like what are the ethics of that? And that's a sort of issue that he goes into, and it's very, very interesting. And I think it was done, considering like, oh, this is a mix of neuroscience and social sciences and you know, it sounds like really unapproachable, but the way he writes it is really like colloquial and really approachable, so it really makes these things very easy to absorb. But I definitely like the way that I did it in little bits, because I think it can get quite heavy. Then we will go to a whole different side of things, and that's Cookie by Jacqueline Wilson. I love Jacqueline Wilson. I always have since I was like 9 years old. I got given a copy of Bad Girls, and I've loved her ever since then. I bought one of her books, Love Frankie, which is one of her most recent ones last year. It's a little about a queer girl, which is obviously very close to my heart. But every once in a while, I like to go to my Jacqueline Wilson shelf, which is just behind me, and reread one of them. And this time I decided to go with Cookie, because I realized that I've only read Cookie once, so I actually could not remember anything about the story at all, which was really kind of nice. It was like reading a whole new book over again, because I can't even remember the year that I got this. But as with many Jacqueline Wilsons, we're following Cookie. She's a bit of an outsider. Well, her name's not Cookie, her name's Beauty. And all the girls at school call her ugly because she's named Beauty, and freaking kids are mean. And she is very much like an outsider, like the strange kid with no friends, which is one of Jacqueline Wilson's favorite protagonists to write from. And I think it helps a lot of little girls to see themselves like that, or like kids of any gender really, to see themselves, you know, in a book like this and them being the main character, rather than just being the butt of people's jokes, or like the one that the main character, you know, befriends to look good. So we're following, like, Cookie's, like, Beauty's not having a good time at school. And at home, she loves her mom. Her mom is wonderful. Her dad is a piece of shit. And this is middle grade, by the way. He's an abusive piece of shit. And I don't want to spoil too much, but basically it shows them getting out of the situation that they're in and into a happier situation, and realizing that there's nothing wrong with them. It's more the circumstances that they were in that were the problem. And as with all Jacqueline Wilsons, it finishes off in a happy way. And it's just it's so very heartwarming. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a very nice palette cleanser, considering that I just finished reading The 10 Types of Humans. I'm just slip stitching this. Bloop, bloop. So that's the first round with the green. So I've got to do one more round, and then that square is done. But first, I'm parched. It's one thing, the throat and the chest and everything like that from the COVID. I'm really like getting that side of things. Okay. The next book I read was The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. I love Tiffany D. Jackson, probably my favorite book so far this year. Was written by Tiffany D. Jackson, so I am determined to read everything she's ever written. And The Weight of Blood is quite recent, and it's a horror. So it's basically retelling the story of Carrie by Stephen King, but from a black woman's perspective. And I was like, chef's kiss. Like, of course I want to hear something from a black woman's perspective rather than an old white man who writes about women's boobs in a really strange way. So while I knew the story of Carrie, let me just give you a rough breakdown. So in Carrie, outcast girl, gets picked on by everyone. She has she's got a very fanatically religious parent, and she has paranormal, like telepathic powers. And she gets invited to the prom by a really popular boy, and they dump a bucket of pig's blood on her. So that was what happened, and then all hell breaks loose with her magical powers. So that's like the basic idea of Carrie. But the way Tiffany D. Jackson does it is she's not just being bullied for who she is, she's also being bullied because of the element of race that's happening here. So in The Weight of Blood, our main character is called Maddie, and it's her father who's very fanatical. Her father is also incredibly racist. So while she is mixed, he has convinced her that because she's white passing, has to live as a white girl. Like her hair has to be a very specific way. She can't ever go to school if it's going to be in the rain because people will find out. And as we open up the story, everyone finds out that Maddie's been living as a white girl, but she's actually black. And the story gets told from a bunch of different perspectives. So we get Maddie's perspective, but we also get like the big football dude, who is what's his name, Kenny. We get his point of view. He's black, but he's very much in with the crowd, because he's a football star, so he's very popular. He's got a very popular, beautiful white girlfriend, and they have this group of friends that are basically all white, and like a whole hullabaloo starts with the fact that Maddie's been living as a white girl, and the racism within this school starts to show itself. Like they have segregated proms, and already that's like causing an issue. I don't want to go too much into this. I'm actually diving too far into this book. So basically it's the story of Carrie, but with a really insidious race aspect to it, and it's unfortunately very realistic, probably for a lot of circumstances. It gets really gory, it gets really bloody. I really like the way it ended, and I like the way that throughout the story, like I said, we're getting a lot of different perspectives, but we also get a perspective like from one of the racist white girls, like the really blatantly like I'm coming to school in blackface racists, just to see like their side of how insidiously they think, and how blatant it can be, like this woe is me attitude, like when she gets basically the consequences of her actions catch up with her, and but it's just a joke, oh my god, they're so sensitive, it's just a joke, and oh my god. So I found that very interesting, and the fact that throughout the book we're getting the story told in the past. Oh my god, there are children screaming past my house. Noisy little bitches. But at the same time, we're also getting a story from the present, because this is all taking place in the past, but in the present, there's a podcast that's following Maddie's case and what happened to the town, because the town basically like burnt to the ground on the night of prom. And so we're getting interviews with people, we're finding out who lived and who didn't live through the massacre, and that jumping backwards and forwards between mediums was really cool, and I really like the way it was done. But I'm going to stop talking about this book because I really think you should read it. But yeah, just trigger warning for lots of racism and blood and gore and police brutality. Then I read a library book that I was so excited to find in there, and that is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I've heard so much about this book, obviously because it won the Women's Prize. But I did not expect to find it. I expected to find her backlist in my library. I did not expect to find Hamnet. But it was in the new section, so I grabbed it immediately. Because I love the way Maggie O'Farrell writes, and this premise was really interesting to me. So it basically follows William Shakespeare's family. But he's not named, and he's not the protagonist. The main story is based on his family. So we get the perspective of Hamnet as we're opening. Hamnet is Shakespeare's son. He was a twin, and his twin sister is sick, and he's running around trying to find people to help her. So we really get like into Hamlet's mind, and we get to know him as a character. But right at the beginning of the book, and if you know anything about Shakespeare, Hamlet died very, very young, and Hamlet was written just after that. So this is about the little boy that inspired him to write Hamlet. And most of the time his father is not present. Most of the story is really based around Hamlet's mother, Agnes. She's also called Anne in some of the histories, but there are letters that he's written to her addressed as Agnes, so I don't know whether those are interchangeable. But yeah, so they live in Stratford. His mother is very much like, oh my god, the children. I think there's literally a fight happening, like on this the like little field right outside my house, like a fight happening with school children. Good God, what was I saying? Yeah, so the mother she's very much like, she's got certain powers. Obviously, this is like a fictionalized story based on true people, but you know, she has premonitions. She sees 2 children standing over her on her deathbed, and she knows that she's going to have 2 children. So when she has 3, she's like worried. And then, yeah, once Hamlet does end up dying, we very much exploring the feelings of grief, and it's really vivid. Like I've experienced like quite a lot of grief in my life. And it really like gets you in the chest, like it really writes about grief in a very visceral manner, and puts the focus on a small boy and his close-knit family rather than the famous father that like always overshadowed their story. And I really love the portrayal of the mother, because she is oh my god, the police came. This is a dramatic filming. But yeah, basically the way that the mother goes through life, she does like healing with like herbs and all of that kind of thing. And then she has this like connection to nature, like she goes out into the forest to give birth to her first child. It's all very like connected with nature, and it's very beautiful. And I love the way it was written. So yeah, I was super, super glad that I finally got to read Hamlet. And then the last book I read was another non-fiction, and that's Sitting Pretty by Rebecca Tossig. Sorry, I struggled to say that without an American accent. So Rebecca is she's got an Instagram page called Sitting Pretty, and she's a writer, and she lives in a wheelchair. So her, I think the tagline is "My ordinary life, you know, from my chair," or "Ordinary life from the disabled body," or something like that. And I've been trying to learn more about the physically disabled part of my community, because I am autistic and bipolar. I do have disabilities, but my disabilities are not physical. So I want to be the best kind of ally that I can be to those with physical disabilities, and like learn a little bit more about accessibility and things like that. And that's what Rebecca talks about. She talks about her plain old ordinary life, and how it is different to an able-bodied person's experience, like going from dating to going to varsity to trying to find a holiday job, you know, all of these different kinds of things, like not being on medical insurance, all kinds of like complications that a disabled body gives you that you don't expect as somebody that doesn't have any physical disabilities. But she also shows the joys and the independence that she can get, and the way that accessibility has helped her, and working with other disabled people and other allies to try and make the world a little bit more accessible to everyone, you know, and no matter, like, just basically all around about education in these sectors. Because I find like so many people are so freaking ableist and so ignorant of these things. And so was I up until, you know, I'm learning every day. I'm learning fucking every day. And this is the reason why I wanted to read this book. And it just shows things in a light that I would never see them on a practical level because of my working physical body. But it just shows the beauty in disability, and how there's nothing wrong with their bodies. It's just that their bodies work slightly different to other people's, and all of our bodies work slightly differently. There's no reason for those who are disabled to be treated like they're other, when all of us are very unique in our own rights and have our own needs. But yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I definitely want to read more. I didn't even say it's essays, it's a set of essays. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. And that brings us to the end of our crafty reads, which is good because I'm starting to get croaky. I don't think I've talked this much in a while. I've been alone. But if you did like this, please like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and I'll check you next time.